art is actually a revolution, because art means total insight into ourselves, into how the human program works, and a total insight into the world as it is, as a phenomenon to our consciousness and perception. Art means to understand the process of interpretation, which is everything more or less in this life. Art means to understand how we go from perception to conception, how we produce our own conceptions, how we produce our own projections, how we produce our own interpretations through already downloaded material, programs of interpretation, programs of meaning, programs of content, narratives of meaning that we have downloaded through our life in this world, in society, in upbringing, within family, at school, with friends, in professional life, in art as a professional discipline and discourse, in any kind, in any field of knowledge that we study. We download these narratives of meaning. We download this. We perceive, download, and store and develop these programs of interpretation, which becomes part of us. This is what I initially meant by my term language game. The language game is not my term. Antonin Artaud in France used it a couple of times, and of course Ludwig Wittgenstein. He tried to understand what a language game is, but of course he failed, but he tried at least. He went into it as best as he could, after coming from the logical, the machine of logic, the machine of logic in Cambridge with Bertrand Russell and more. All right, but anyway, art means to take on the biggest responsibility that a human being can ever take on in his life, because art means a total understanding. Art is understanding. Art is insight. Art is to understand. Art is not to produce manifestations, objects, paintings like Ai Weiwei. This is manifestation, it's a journalistic pornography. It's not art, it's a journalistic pornography. But as a manifestation, it carries poetic content. As a manifestation, as an exhibition, as an installation, right? As an installation in a museum, it carries a poetic content, because all art is manipulation, as Charles Baudelaire said long time ago. All art is manipulation, and the manipulation of art consists in making a poetic it is to make a manifestation loaded with a poetic significance. And that's what Ai Weiwei does. His work is, of course, political, which is wonderful, it's great, it's very good, but it's journalism. Anish Kapoor is also in manifestations. Anish Kapoor has intellect. If he didn't have intellect, if he didn't have understanding, if he didn't have conceptual intellect, he wouldn't buy the rights to the most black color or the most black pigment that has ever been seen by the human eye. But he bought that. He bought the rights to it. Nonetheless, he wouldn't have done that if he didn't have any kind of refined, subtle, conceptual, philosophical intellect. So he understands the depth of art. He understands the depth of these things, but he's stuck in the production of manifestations, So it's not real science. Well, you could say that there's real science in his installations. Same as because it's real science in any installation. It's real science in 300,000 tons of rusted steel in an Ai Weiwei installation too. It's science in there too. So it's opium for the people, in a way, because it's loaded with poetic content, right? But the approach to this kind of artwork is journalistic, True art is understanding, true art is insight, which means that true art is actually education, in a way, Yeah, you could say true art is actually education. Well, it's not as far-fetched as it sounds. Just think about what happens when you read a book by a great writer. Then you're educated, right? The writer is educating you, right? Flaubert, Balzac, Tolstoy, Beckett, Sartre, Inger Christensen. You're educated. You receive education from the mind of the writer. Schopenhauer pointed that out very clearly. He said that a writer can only convey his intellect, and an artist too can only convey his intellect. So that's why it's a good thing to not get stuck in manifestations, in the game of manifestations, in the game of installations, in the game of producing emotional, poetic content, because that's what it's all about, to produce emotional, poetic content. Well, anyway, art is actually a revolution, because art means to understand. And if you don't understand, then you're not an artist. Art is insight. Art is to give complete clarity to the world. Art is to understand the world. That's what art is. Art is to understand the world. It's not to produce a painting. It's not to produce a painting. That is decoration. We have to separate between art and decoration, which means that there are very, 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 very few artists in this world. Very few artists in this world. And a lot of décorateurs, a lot of decorators, a lot of interior designers, a lot of performance artists who works in journalistic manipulation in order to produce emotional and poetic content, Or intellectuals who delve into the discourse of art, Art is a discourse, so if you're intelligent, your work as an artist could be just to work analytically within the discourse itself. I was on that wagon for a long time, simply because I went into the discourse analysis as well, or art as analysis of discourse. Art is the real revolution. Art is the real revolution simply because it is understanding. It doesn't mean to change anyone or anything. To be a revolutionary, it only means to understand the world in the truest way that you could ever do. Art means to become someone who understands the world as much as they possibly can. You don't have to change the world. You don't have to change countries and regimes. There is absolutely no violence. There is absolutely nothing that has to change, even if you become a revolutionary, because art as a revolution will simply just improve humanity. And the improvement of humanity will lead to a better society, into a better global world society. That's my only inner true heart message. To improve global world society by the means of art. And what does that mean? By the means of total, true insights into ourselves, into the human program, into the human being, and into the world as it is, totally speaking. So, art is the only absolute, ultimate revolution, simply because it is the only absolute, ultimate effort, approach, and attitude towards understanding as much as we can of that which we call the world and ourselves. Okay, thank you very much.